Hello, I'm Vlad Sparastoria, and I know about shooting. This is a great example of the Fabrique Nationale 49, specifically an Egyptian contract model. So we have a great opportunity to talk about a somewhat forgotten Cold War weapon, but also to complete a story. This concerns independent Egypt and its weapons, which we partly discussed with the Akim. The first weapon to be produced in Egypt, also because this is an Egyptian design, but produced by Fabrique Nationale in Belgium. How does this weapon fit into the context of the weapons of that era? Well, the name 49 is a bit misleading, in the sense that yes, the final version of this design is from 1949. A bit late in some ways, and if it seems a bit late to us, it's because the development of this weapon started much earlier. By Dieudonné Saïve, protégé of John Moses Browning, his last student, after the great Mormon inventor died, and Dieudonné Saïve continued work that Browning had already started in many different fields. Let's recall the Browning High Power, considered one of the best pistols of World War II. Saïve, however, was also working, like almost everyone else in Europe, on the idea of a self-loading rifle. In fact, he had already patented some things at the end of 1918. However, the times were not yet ripe at that moment for the development of this type of weapon. However, with the outbreak of war in the 1930s, most nations were looking to replace their bolt-action rifles, because a self-loading rifle offers many clear advantages in the world of firearm combat. They not only have a higher rate of fire, but are also, ironically, simpler for infantry to use. Maybe conscripted soldiers who are able to develop this firepower thanks to the self-loading weapon. Already at the end of the 1930s, Saïve and Fabrique Nationale would produce prototypes of this rifle of his. However, obviously, World War II would break out, and with World War II, Fabrique Nationale stopped all further development to focus on the production of bolt-action rifles. Now, Belgium was not yet at war at that time, but no one was under any illusion that soon it would be Belgium's turn, as would happen to the rest.
Saïve, in all this, the fact that Belgium was not immediately invaded, but already stopped the experimentation on his self-loading rifle, actually managed to hide the entire project. The Germans would not discover this
Project, and Saïve, after the evacuation from Belgium, after the invasion in 1940 of Belgium itself, would end up in England. He would take his prototypes and drawings to England, where he would continue his work.
If this work had started with the 765 for the Belgian 53, also known as the Argentine 765, even though they have the exact same caliber, well, in England it doesn't fit. It did fit, however it was produced.
The Otto Mauser, counterintuitively. The English used the 303 for the vast majority of their weapons, but there was a machine gun. The Basal, which used the Otto Mauser, it was a machine gun mainly used in tanks, so there was availability of the Otto Mauser. His work will continue in Otto Mauser. It will continue in that model known as the Exp-1, that is, the experimental one. By the way, these models are still preserved, for example at the Royal Armouries in Leeds, England, where they can be admired. The war, however, changes a lot of things drastically.
A weapon like this, similar to the Garand or Samizariadnaya Vintovka Tokareva, 40 made perfect sense during the war.
The moment the Germans introduced the intermediate cartridge to the world, and with the Sturmgewehr 44, as you know, everything changes in firearms. And actually, the work being done at that moment when the war ends is twofold. Because it's clear to everyone, especially a genius like Saïve,
that the intermediate cartridge is a certain more modern ergonomics of the weapon, production with sheet metal.
The pistol grip and detachable magazines will be the future. However, this future is under development. I don't know if you remember, but the early version of the famous Fabrique Nationale Fusil Automatique Léger used magazines and ammunition from the STIG-44. In the original idea of the Fabrique Nationale, they kept developing this to make it a battle rifle. The Fabrique Nationale was a separate project, and the Fabrique Nationale Fusil Automatique Léger wasn't intended to be, in the original concept, to ever have the full power cartridge. Because this was the weapon with the full power cartridge. They actually end up being developed in parallel like this. A good part of the work had already been done. However, when this is put
into production in an early version in 47, and then, as the name implies, in 49, the Fusil Automatique Léger was almost ready, and the Fusil Automatique Léger was getting more and more
a bigger and bigger cartridge.
until it finally reached, of course, the 7.62 by 51 NATO. The Fusil Automatique Léger, as you know, is a weapon from the early 1950s, so making the,
how to call it, the father, the older brother, quickly obsolete.
However, in the late 1940s and early 1950s, regarding the international arms market, especially self-loading types,
there wasn't much choice.
If you were a small, possibly independent nation in Latin America, Africa, or Asia,
you had little choice. Buy Garands from the Americans,
and remember one thing,
to buy weapons for your own army.
It's not just a matter of paying the monetary price. Often it comes down to paying the political price for this nation's influence over you.
Or you turn to the Soviet Union, and even there you had to pay the monetary price, in addition to the political price of Soviet influence.
What could be done?
Well, there weren't many other companies that already had a self-loading rifle design ready. So many nations,
I like to say the third world, but it almost sounds like an insult. Many independent nations in Latin America, in Africa,
and Asia will turn to Fabrique Nationale for their purchase of self-loading rifles.
Only they could do it without political implications or aligning with the United States or Soviet Union. And that's exactly what Egypt needed. We've talked about it a little, but Egypt, as you surely know, was under
British protectorate, officially a kingdom,
independent. However, British influence was extremely strong.
After World War II, King Farouk of Egypt sought to break free from British and French influence.
And one of the ways to do that was through firearms.
They had British weapons then, but also large stockpiles of 8mm Mauser ammo left by the Germans.
The Germans halted in Africa.
That African campaign would end. Its advance would stop at the gates of El Alamein.
In the early 1950s, he signed a contract with Belgian Fabrique Nationale to produce these rifles.
They will be the first self-loading rifles
of the Egyptians. They will be entirely produced in Belgium. More than 30,000 will be made, but they will be the core that will arm, let's say,
the new troops not tied to the west of Free Egypt.
If you want more details, I discussed this further when I talked about the Hakim, the first rifle later produced in Egypt. You can find this video by clicking in the top right corner.
But now let's move the camera. Let's review the Fabrique Nationale 49, then test it out.
So, let's take a look at this beautiful Fabrique Nationale 49 from the Egyptian contact. The Fabrique Nationale 49 is interesting because, as we've mentioned several times in this video, it's a weapon that was already obsolete when it was born, in the sense that this is a weapon, technologically speaking,
from World War II,
which is produced afterwards. Now, the weapon itself will reveal that it's from World War II. But let's start, as always, with the tour of the markings, the engravings that reveal part of the story.
The weapon's right side displays the designation Fabrique Nationale d'Armes de Guerre Herstal Belgique.
This is clearly the weapon's manufacturer.
Unlike the Hakim, which was Egypt's first domestically produced weapon seen on the channel, these were made exclusively
in Belgium.
We also find the serial number repeated in numbers, Western but also in Arabic ones.
Registration number, which is also repeated here, on the butt of the weapon. We also find on the receiver of the weapon the emblem of King Farouk, the crown with inscriptions in Arabic above it that identify the second-to-last ruler of Egypt, independent Egypt.
We also find other inscriptions on the rear sight.
Obviously, here we have an adjustable diopter. However, we can adjust it for the required distance. Arabic numerals mark the distance.
Let's review the weapon's technical features.
Already on the stock, we find the first thing that reveals to us that this is a weapon.
1. Pre-war concept. 2. Built in peacetime.
But how much brass, for heaven's sake?
I hope you can see it, but it's hard to show since it's on the stock.
Overall, this is a massive weapon. The brass parts here are massive. The receiver that we'll see now is massive. The wood is wide and thick. This is a hefty weapon, and it's mainly heavy.
Down here we have one of the first attachment points for the belt.
We'll find 3 on the weapon. Most Egyptian contacts have 2. even though some of these rifles were set up for mounting optics to be used as designated marksman rifles. And those, in fact, that have this setup also have a third attachment point for the sling. Moving back, we reach the core of the weapon's action, which we'll discuss soon. With its trigger, its bolt, the safety next to the trigger here. The safety position fully blocks the trigger. When I have access to the trigger, the weapon can fire. I have a magazine that is not removable, or rather, it's easily removable for cleaning, but it's not a contained unit. When we see it now and remove it, the magazine spring itself will pop out, so it's not a quick change. The weapon is usually loaded with stripper clips. Moving further forward, we find the charging handle, the famous sling attachment point, specifically for snipers. On the band, another point for the sling, and where the handguard ends, we find the front sight, the gas port, the bayonet lug, and finally the muzzle. In the action of the weapon, we find other complications that we will now look at. We're still dealing with a gas-operated weapon. We have a long-stroke piston, which we'll see now, that operates a tilting bolt. The bolt, as soon as we disassemble it, you'll see, is identical to the one in the Fabrique Nationale Fusil Automatique Léger. It's no coincidence. The Fabrique Nationale Fusil Automatique Léger follows, sometimes simultaneously, nearly this design. One very important thing. This is a weapon, as we'll see during the live fire test, that's heavily overgassed, and I suspect it's like that to function properly. With Egyptian conscripts in the desert during the 1950s, as you can see, this action creates an opening where dirt can enter easily. We have a sheet of metal that can be used to close this open space. Even when it's closed, I can shoot or operate the weapon. As you can see, the charging handle opens up this same space for me, but it remains open and must be closed. Manually, if we want to protect it a little bit better the weapon. One last element remains to push. You can look, press, and say, but what the heck is it for? Here it's used to mount the optics. On the side, the optics can be mounted right here. The optics for these weapons. You know what? Let's take it apart to better appreciate how it's made inside and see the similarities and differences with its little brother. De fusil automatique léger de fabrique nationale, fusil automatique léger de fabrique nationale, fusil automatique léger. To disassemble it, we first made sure the weapon is unloaded. As you can see, I put my hand in here to release the bolt because there's no other way to release the hold open itself. It loaded the ammunition, you pulled back the handle, and the weapon would close. We have actually a very complicated top cover that also includes the sights. It's much like the FAL, slightly different but with many similarities. We need to rotate this disassembly element by 180 degrees. At this point, we can push it a bit forward. And be careful with the tension of the spring. Remove this. Another massive top cover. And the recoil spring. This is a double recoil spring that has a first part of the guide rod inside it. Before disassembling further, look at the complexity of this part. This part, the top cover, which includes the sights, is milled from solid, yet it's a part. That's very complicated. It's complicated. This will start after World War II and partly during, it began to disappear. They will make fewer and fewer pieces this complicated in order to look for much simpler technical and production solutions. We can move back now. The shutter, and at the right height we'll find it. A notch that will allow us here to be able to lift the bolt carrier and bolt. Now we'll get to the bolt and the bolt carrier, but we can do one last thing. Let's appreciate the internal hammer of the weapon. Obviously, by pulling the trigger, you go to release it. We can also remove the magazine. Removing the magazine requires a tool, such as a cartridge tip, because something must be inserted. Return here to push this tab. Usually there's no way to grab this tab, so I use my little demonstration hand to help myself. I pull this element back easily. And here is the magazine, which, as you can see, its spring and the elevator do not stay inside, but we have the spring with the elevator and the box of the magazine itself. Another thing worth noting here, as you can see, the gas piston comes out. By the way, let's go get the piston itself. Now, Mr. Bolt, I'll get to you. But we can rotate by 180 degrees the gas block. By the way, here this is also the same, almost like the Fabrique Nationale Fusil Automatique Léger. We use a cartridge case, and this groove is made specifically for the Auto Mauser cartridge. It's a little bit hard. We can go ahead and rotate it, but be careful because it's under spring tension. The gas system is a bit dirty because we've already fired this weapon. Here's the gas plug, very similar to those of the Fabrique Nationale Fusil Automatique Léger, and if we struggle with it a little or push it from the other side, the piston should come out as well of the gas. Let's see. Obviously, did the gas piston want to cooperate in this video, in your opinion? Unfortunately, it's a bit dirty. Sorry, I put the rifle upright, but you didn't see it. It popped out. From this hole, the gas piston with the piston return spring. As you can see, there's not a lot of science here. And I repeat, look at how similar it is to the Fabrique Nationale Fusil Automatique Léger. This piston of his. Gas piston. This very long piston, but it's a short stroke piston. Just a little tap and then it goes back with its return spring. As I promised you, let's also take a look at the bolt port. And here again, we'll see a system that we really know very well. Because by separating them, here we are. We have a bolt carrier, seemingly identical to the one, except for the charging handle. Fabrique Nationale Fusil Automatique Léger. We've seen this countless times, too. A tilting bolt that locks into place. Back here. Very similar, in fact, to that of the Fusil Automatique Léger. This system has been thoroughly tested for many years by Dieudonné Saïve. Here, it's really hard to go wrong. This is the locking surface. We also have the weapon's firing pin, struck by the hammer. Then, quite obviously, the weapon's extractor itself. Let's put everything back together. Here we have put the bolt back together with the bolt carrier. See how it swings and how the bolt carrier forces the bolt to lower. Here's the back of the bolt. Okay, first, let's reassemble the system. The gas system. Let's reinstall the piston return spring. On the piston itself, let's go put the gas piston in its place. Then, we put the gas plug back in place. We have some trouble with the spring tension of the piston itself. Here it is. Later, multiple tries and swearing, the weapon helped us succeed. But we're not done yet. Let's rewind for a moment. The magazine we removed, we can simply put the spring, the elevator, in its box. Insert everything inside. Here we have repositioned the charger. Here it is. We can put it back now. The shutter and holder in its place. The shutter must be unlocked, so move it forward. Here you go. The shutter and holder are in place. We can put our nice recoil spring back into the bolt carrier. Here we are. And we put on the recoil spring. We can now put our top cover. Here we go. And we lock everything in place. The shaft is easier to disassemble. But now let's finally go try out this beautiful weapon. And here we are at the Sur Range, where we're testing this wonderful Egyptian Fabrique Nationale 49. Let's shoot and check the first shots. Also because this weapon, I'm very curious. It was one of the most interesting weapons I wanted to try. Also because it's the predecessor of the Fusil Automatique Léger and the work of Dieudonné Saive.
All right, we have our target. Let's take aim.
There, with the last shot, the fixed magazine.
Here stays open.
I'll share my initial impressions. The ergonomics are very Lee Enfield-like. Anyone who has shot with a Lee Enfield will really recognize the shapes and in some features of this weapon. Anyone who knows, for example, the number 4 will also feel very comfortable with these sights that seem to be taken straight from the Lee Enfield.
Saive, in any case, continued to develop this weapon right in England during the war is no coincidence at all. So these features are quite similar. It seems a bit overgassed.
Now, as always in these cases, I don't know if it's the fault of this particular unit or if it's a general issue with all the models.
I should try more Egyptian Fabrique Nationale 49s to be sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if, for an army.
Secondary, we could say. Certainly not the first choice when it comes to armies in the 40s and 50s around the world, like Egyptian conscripts in a sandy environment.
Using an overgassed weapon for guaranteed reliability could be a rather sought-after feature, quite logical from this point of view. And if I have to make a criticism of the weapon, it's the placement of its magazine, in the sense that it is positioned exactly in the center gravity here. So you want to be able to put your hand here on the magazine. The weapon's grip suggests holding it farther forward. There's nothing wrong with this grip, but especially to shoot a bit more accurately, you want to distribute the weight a little better, a bit closer to the center of gravity of the weapon.
But let's do one thing. Let's reload and try again.
Of course, I didn't get the ammo ready in my hand before I started filming. Normally we could use a
Stripper clip, since the magazine isn't here. Removable, or rather it can be removed for cleaning.
with stripper clips. Clearly this process is a bit faster. Okay.
And
Okay, it's now stored correctly. Let's see.
it hits a bit hard, I repeat, but in my opinion, that's because it's overgassed. Military weapons, especially those designed to work in tough environments, are often like this. There's one thing
That we noticed as we were handling it here.
now. Keep in mind, this is 1930s technology in terms of weaponry.
Just because the war starts, it won't arm the Belgian army in 39 and 40, but this weapon will arrive very late. It's heavy, I mean, it weighs a lot.
I'm sure it weighs as much as in Samazariadnaya Vintovka Tokareva, 40 and a grand, even though it's just a design, from many years later.
The weight actually seems a bit much to me.
At times poorly distributed, also with the fact that I don't really have a good place to put it. This hand, it's heavy, it's unbearably heavy. And when I think of the Fabrique Nationale Fusil Automatique Léger, we naturally compare it to the design of the Fabrique Nationale Fusil Automatique Léger
For reasons we've already explained,
The Fusil Automatique Léger is also heavy.
but it distributes the weight much better.
It's hard to explain this in front of a camera to people who might not handle these things, but I can easily shoulder the Fusil Automatique Léger with one hand, and I can shoot it with one hand.
It's a bit extreme, isn't it? But I can shoulder it and at least handle it.
Not this one, it just wants to fall apart.
All of it forward. The shot?
In this context, it's very good and works well, though a bit stiff like most military triggers, but also because the Orion sights are excellent and very similar to Lee Enfield.
Actually, you can take shots.
Both accurately, but also very quick acquisitions using the dioptra.
You point it that way and instantly, naturally, with your cheekbone resting on the dioptra, so you can aim with it.
Where do I get this weapon? Do I have to hold it like this? It's very uncomfortable.
You, as always, Orlandi, are left-handed. You can survive loading without a clip.
Yes, but it makes me think, are left-handed people discriminated against in Muslim societies?
This also happens in Christian societies.
No, it's a question. It's not a...
Good question.
No, because maybe they would have corrected me, I don't know, with whips.
Like the nuns used to do.
So, pull back the charging handle and go.
Let's see the organisms.
Shoot and tell us!
These organisms are beautiful.
Okay!
So,
Go ahead.
Yes. It's true, you don't know where to put your hands, but whatever. Maybe you hold her like this.
yeah, you're almost tempted to use the magazine.
I thought about doing it like this.
Yes.
Yes, but you know, it's not. It's not like, you know, a kappa. There's space for it, but that's not the weapon's problem. The problem with this weapon is that it kicks like a wall.
I think it's overgassed.
In my opinion, it's definitely overgassed.
Yeah, I think it's overgassed by design.
You say it's by design because it's in the desert.
Yeah, it ended up with Egyptian conscripts in the 1950s out in the desert.
They're corrosive munitions.
Yeah, corrosive munitions, often at that time.
Yes, overgassed. It's quite a brick.
It's heavy. It's heavy and the weight is poorly distributed.
The wood is thick.
Yes.
And the metal that is here, there are some grooves that they almost seem you could use them to make railroad beams.
Damn it. In this, too, it shows how it's a weapon from another era.
Yes, absolutely.
We're still discussing the Fabrique Nationale Fusil Automatique Léger's sheet metal, but we're from an earlier generation of self-loading weapons.
Even for construction.
Look. We're not at the level of the exquisite pre-war productions, but this is still impressive. Too complicated to be a design.
It's quite a piece.
It's made too well.
Complicated. It's now clear that during the Cold War, this weapon quickly became obsolete.
Yes.
If this weapon had been used in World War II, I think it would have played a bigger role. It just feels like a World War II rifle to me, even though it isn't.
In my opinion, yes.
Ha ha!
Egypt will be defended.
I'm having fun. It's a nice design. It's a nice design coming to life. It's already becoming obsolete. Just look at the Fabrique Nationale Fusil Automatique Léger.
But if it had already arrived,
During World War II, it would definitely have been a very interesting contender to the Garand and the Samozariadnaya Vintovka Tokareva.
thank you for watching. Remember, these videos are made by you, like the collector who brought me this one today.
Egyptian Fabrique Nationale. 49 semi-automatic Fabrique Nationale for me to test. If you own unique firearms, contact me. If you want to contribute directly to the channel in other ways, consider subscribing to the channel, for example. It gives you access to exclusive content and helps pay for the range back here.
Also consider buying the t-shirts, but most importantly, leave a like and a comment.
And if you haven't done it yet, subscribe to the channel.
It's free. It helps me a lot, and you can always unsubscribe when I end up offending your favorite weapon. From me, from Campo Sir and Spessa, that's all. See you next time.